Howdy y'all, Joe here, training is blank. It's been a while. I got married, I got a job, COVID's still a thing. It's been quite the 4 months. In that time though, I did a bit of a reimagining of my own brand, new resume, new cover letter, new portfolio, but what I wanted to talk to you about was something I unleashed onto the world and got a lot of great response and great questions on, and that is a sizzle reel. Now, I built one, and it really helped me stand out during my job searching, and I know that is a very common challenge out there. So today, I wanted to introduce you to a sizzle reel and give you some tips and tricks on how to make one. In other videos, I'll also show you my creation process. So here we go. First off, what is a sizzle reel exactly? For this purpose, the best way to describe it is it's a personal promotional video that lets you show off your skills and experience in a very unique, very engaging way. Sizzle reels are often used in entertainment, like for a TV network's new show lineup or a highlight reel for a sports team. Kind of like these examples.
Take it to the top. Shot block, a shot, scores! Matthew Kachuk!
You've come to the right place.
Let's do this.
The purpose of a sizzle reel is, well, to help you sizzle, to generate hype, to generate buzz, to get someone to say, I want to learn more about this person. And that's really it. It's not a reading of your resume or a shotgun blast of your portfolio pieces. It's a blend of everything you can offer, usually set to an awesome soundtrack. So the mission here was to create a training plan that would communicate remote worker expectations and also set up new and future employees for success when working remotely. In the world of phones and Facebook, there is enormous competition to keep learners from looking at your content all the way through. Thank you so much for joining, and I will see you next time. Now, you can use this as extra padding for an application or simply as a networking or promotion piece. Say if you're a guest on a podcast or doing a speaking engagement and want to let people get a cool introduction to you. There's a lot of great uses for one. So let's talk about how to get started. The more you think about a sizzle reel like a music video, the more interesting it's going to be to watch. And honestly, the more fun it's going to be for you to create it. If you're not enjoying what you're creating, others probably won't enjoy watching it. Few key components come together for this. Number 1, your content. Number 2, music, of course. Number 3, timing. And number 4 is movement. We'll talk about all of these later. All right, let's dive in. As I mentioned, a sizzle reel isn't your resume, and it's not really your portfolio. It's kind of a weird mixture of the two, plus some things that might not fit in either. For example, I show off some snippets from this blog, and I show how multiple components came together for a single project I worked on. At the end of the day, I'm really telling you the story of me, and I chose to do mine in 3 parts. Me as an instructional designer, me as a content developer, and me as a strategic combo platter. And then I wrapped all of that up into a neat little package. It might help you to think that way. Instead of, I've got 90 seconds to fill somehow, think, what skills do I want to focus on? For my ID work, I showed off a project brief example plus 2 parts of a single project. For my content development, I showed off some video, and for my combo platter, I talked about my graphic experience and showed off this blog. Woven into that were resume pieces like my experience, my product knowledge, etc. If you have things published, awards, certificates, or certifications, probably look at sneaking those in as transitions. Also great ideas for sizzle reels, summaries, like my 8+ years of training experience, 6 years in Agile, 5 years in LMS. These are normal lines that might be force-fed into perhaps a cover letter, but they get to take a prominent position here. Best advice to start is to come up with a laundry list of things that you could use, and then see what might go together. Now, I should note, if you can't show it in your portfolio for privacy or NDA reasons, this does not get around that. Do not show it here either. But let's say most of your experience comes from maybe one company or one industry. Maybe that's an element you spend a portion of your video focusing on. If you're great at maybe 1 or 2 programs like Rise or Camtasia, that could be another way to group things. Make a list. And also, don't worry about showing everything. Use this video to get people to want to go to your portfolio. Then show everything. Okay, so you have a list of content. Don't worry about anything else just yet. You might want to make an outline or something, but I advise you to do some shopping first. And honestly, this is the most important, most fun, and most addicting part by far: selecting the music. Ideally, look for something fun, upbeat, that you can make your visuals dance to in a way. Before I jump into that though, there are a couple of rules. Number 1, no mainstream. No top 40. Yes, my first examples had those, but those are also large networks. They spent a lot of money to use those songs. If you have that kind of cash, let me know and I will send you my Venmo. Really nothing known. And yes, gamers, that also includes your video game music too. You don't want to deal with copyright or licensing issues, and trust me, there is plenty out there for you to find that is what we call royalty free, but we'll get to that. Number 2, personally, I also suggest you avoid anything with lyrics. You don't want the words of the song fighting against the words on the page. Also, don't sing the words on the page. That should be a given. Now, I want to set you up for success if you don't have a lot of audio editing experience. So naturally, if you do, you can take some liberties in, the rest of this section. But for starters, let's start with a search. If you have editing software like Camtasia, it's possible that they have their own asset library that came with the software. Camtasia does, for example. It's actually pretty fantastic, and they have some free songs that would work great for a sizzle reel. Side note, if you are familiar with it, it's actually storyblocks.com, which is another great site for content. If not, pick your engine of choice and keep these terms in your mind: royalty-free and stock. Searching for royalty-free or stock music means that you are finding tracks that are able to be used without owning the copyright, and this is vital. If you don't want to spend money, search for something like free stock music, and then look out for the free sites that specifically say they have royalty-free content. Please note, I haven't vetted them all. It's the internet. Proceed with caution. You might also find sites that have free trials or maybe charge a few bucks a month. Go for it. Nice thing with many of these sites also is that you can sample some of the tracks anyway. All right, so what are you looking for? I'm going to try really hard to not make this long. Also, much of this is personal preference, so you may have your own cool idea, and all this stuff, you can throw it out the window. Go for it. I'm not going to stop you. Nice thing with most of these sites is they usually have filters, so here's what I would fidget with. First off is length, which is probably the most important component. Personally, I like less than 2 minutes. The longer you go, the more you risk someone not watching it at the end, or watching it to the end, and the end is probably where you have your contact info, like where your website is or where your portfolio's at. As far as a minimum though, that's kind of on you. I like more than a minute so I can actually show a couple of things. If it's less than that, it kind of feels like just a commercial to me. I should note also that having a song that actually ends as opposed to a loop that you just fade out makes a big difference here. You might have a great 5-minute song, but if it just fades out at the 2-minute mark to end your reel, it kind of just feels weird to me. I don't know, maybe that's just me. So I wanted to go ahead and actually take a second, show you the difference between the two of these. So a song that just fades out and a song that actually ends, and why it's important. Now, as I play these two tracks, think about the end, the very last thing that, the very last note that you hear being kind of the screen where you're going to have your contact information and maybe your LinkedIn, your portfolio. So that's kind of where this will end. So I'm going to use this Melbourne bounce. This is going to be one that I use to, we're going to fade this one out. And then I'm also going to show you the difference between that with a summer acoustic pop. So here's a fade out. Okay, so that's a fade out. It just kind of slowly drifts away. So now let's look at the summer acoustic pop, and I'm going to take you to where it actually ends. So here we go. See how you can kind of maybe, you know, in your mind, again, if you think about this like a music video, there's a clear, like, boom, it ends, and then that's the screen, and I can land on it. It's kind of a comfortable spot for me as a listener to end on. That and the track actually kind of builds towards that end. So as you assemble this reel, as you assemble this video, you can lead the visuals towards that. So that's the difference between the two. I think it really makes a huge difference. Second up is genres and moods. Now, nothing is off limits, but there are a couple of keywords that I like to start at. Not every site might have these, but I do know that these are pretty common. These are the ones that I see just about everywhere. Corporate, pop, happy, playful, inspiring, sometimes angry has some really cool stuff in it. Honestly, play around, find something that you like. Lastly, for music is variety. Now, this isn't a filter, but I like to listen for opportunities to do something interesting that would also be timed to a beat or maybe an instrument. Like a clear hit of something, like in mine, where hands clap to begin and I time something new happening on each one of those claps. That's movement and timing, and where the video really gets engaging to watch. I also like having the entire song evolve. So remember, I have a bit of a story going on. I kind of like that in the music that I pick also. So let's go over one example of that. So again, I'm going to show you two examples, two different tracks. The first one is going to be one where it sounds the same over and over through the entire 2 minutes and 42 seconds. Yeah, there's a couple weird little spots here where something interesting might happen, but the majority of the song, it's kind of the same beat playing over and over. And then I'll show you what I mean by something that evolves and literally changes into something different, and kind of tells its own story. So here's happy and inspiring. By the way, the filters of corporate plus inspiring together always lead to something that sounds like the beginning of your company kickoff. I personally think they're nauseating, but that is truly just me. So here we go. All right, I'm gonna click a little later in, and you'll hear it kind of sounds the same. Let's go further. See what I mean? Kind of sounds the same the entire way through. So it's that same loop just over and over and over. Now I'll show you what I mean by something that has variety, something that evolves. And again, I really want to use this one for something. I'm just in love with this track. But here we go. Okay, let's move on. Okay, not too big difference. Ah, something completely different has happened. We are a lot more upbeat. We've added a lot more instruments. The song has evolved. very different than the last thing I clicked on. And again, we changed again. So that's what I mean by something that kind of evolves. Like as I clicked around, it was not the same loop over and over. We added more instruments. Maybe we had kind of a subtle rhythm in the back that was pretty consistent, but it was just something new was added, and the tempo seemed to change, and the whole vibe seemed to change. That's the kind of stuff that I personally think makes these a heck of a lot of fun. It gets louder, it gets more engaging up until some point where it just kind of ends. Boom. So that's what I mean by variety. Now, there's actually a ton of nuances. Some of these rules change, like if you are showing off a lot more presentation stuff where you have audio over the top, then maybe you don't want something that's constantly hitting, and maybe that slow loop that I showed in my first example is better. But because there's so many of those things, I would much rather do that all in another video where we just basically talk about how to go shopping for music. It really will take hours of your life away. It's a lot of fun. Next up is timing, and I'm really thinking about this at the same time I'm shopping for music. What moments exist audibly that I can attach something visually interesting to? Easiest place to start, think about when you tap your feet or clap your hands to a beat. So let's go ahead and find one. Okay, so back trying to find a track that we're basically just going to kind of naturally want to like bob our head to a little bit. Like if I can get somebody engaged in the music itself, I'm going to be great. But the reason that I care is because these kind of moments where I'm like bobbing or I snap my fingers to some sort of rhythm, think about those as opportunities to have something appear onto the screen. So let's, and we're not doing this. No. But you kind of know what I'm trying to avoid. So let's see what we can find. Upbeat corporate success. This is probably gonna sound the same. Yeah, I'm not really like snapping my fingers to this. I can, but it kind of feels awkward. So that's not one that I'm thinking about. This is my jam. Let's see if it's my jam. There we go. So this snapping that I'm doing to this rhythm, think about these things as this is an opportunity to show something. Now, not every single one of these is something where I show, but, you know I've got something I can work with. So maybe something appears, maybe something flies in, maybe something zooms out, maybe something pans. So this would be a good example. Sort of. It kind of doesn't do anymore, so this doesn't really evolve. Again, oh, there we go. There's a little bit of a change. Not a lot of one, though. I bet we could do better. I probably wouldn't pick this for a sizzle reel. But it is still kind of in that I can bob my head. I can find clear things that I would want something to show up with. Maybe like that trumpet note, or whatever that is in the background. Whatever that is, that might be a good thing to use as well. Other things that I'm considering when I'm looking at timing is what do I want you to read and what do I want you to just acknowledge? So when I bring in portfolio pieces, I don't really want you to look at it in depth. Like, I don't want you to read my PowerPoint slide. I want you to read that I created a 2-day product bootcamp that I delivered globally to internal employees and external clients with accompanying documentation. The deck and the docs are just a super quick visual of the work to show some of my skills, but also to keep changing the screen a bit. As I'm thinking about what I want you to read, I want to make sure to keep it on the screen long enough for you to actually do that. I'll get more into it when I talk about movement, but what this means is, kind of like I said in the example, don't think that every beat and every new instrument means that something needs to happen. In that this is my jam track, that would be a lot. So really, it's just a guide. It's nothing more than that. A great way to go about doing this is when you do your editing is to take that text you want them to read and put it on your timeline and then just extend it for however long you want it to be there and then figure out the rest later. Work around that. To add a little bit more flair also, I like to have content appear on a beat and leave on a beat. As a viewer, they're really both just as much fun for me. Lastly, and by far the trickiest, is movement. Even with minimal video editing skills, timing isn't terribly difficult to nail, but movement requires knowing what you have at your disposal and a little bit of creativity. This is where the hard work really is. And when I say movement, I mean things happening on the screen. What keeps the viewer interested and wanting to watch. In an entertainment sizzle reel, it's the changing of the clip, it's the loud noise accompaniment, the cheers, the explosion, the big text fly-in. For a professional training reel, I'm hoping nothing blows up in your background. But tricks here could be like a pan and zoom, the rotation of your visuals, a fly-in of a creative asset that you made. In my case, I took advantage of one of the quieter moments of the song to show a part of a presentation that I did. So the mission here was to create a training plan that would communicate remote worker expectations and also set up new and future employees for success when working remotely. The adjustment in audio is also another change. It's like a dance, a composition, an epic choreographed display. What makes these truly captivating is when you do it with timing. That hit of the drum met with the next appearance of how long you've been in the industry. Those short hand claps zipping you around the screen as an introduction, kind of like what I did with mine. That's what makes the experience an absolute joy. I also give this treatment to videos too. A personal preference of mine is if I'm showing you a video in my reel, I'll just play it. Let it go. Maybe I'll mute the audio for it, of course, but I don't want a static screenshot. Remember, I really just want you to acknowledge that it's there, so I don't need you to pay attention. In my reel, I show off a super quick animation that makes absolutely no sense in its current context, but I don't care. If you want to see more about that project, go to my portfolio. If I have teased you enough to say, that looks interesting, what was that project? The Sizzle Reel did the only job that I wanted it to do. Save the editing for a different kind of creation video where I'll just pull up Camtasia and we'll walk through a couple of things. But I want you to be thinking about the timing and the movements and the soundtrack and whatnot. So that way you can kind of be thinking, like I said, like it's a music video. You listen to a beat, you listen to a drum beat or a cymbal, and you're like, oh, this is when the name is gonna fly in, and that'd be super cool. And this is when the video is gonna play, and it'd be cool to have this as a soundtrack. Or this is when I've got resume line 1, job 1, job 2, job 3, job 4 on a beat. Just like kind of like throw your hands around kind of like I do, and then try to put that on a canvas. That's really what makes this so much fun to do and so much fun to watch. But yeah, look out for another video where I'm actually talking about or I'm actually showing you how to compile all of this stuff in a timeline. I'm not going to leave you hanging there. But I do want to get back to kind of where I want to bring this whole thing full circle. So let's chat about the direction. Thinking back to your list of things, it's also good to consider how much of the same thing you're showing in order. So basically think text, images, video. And where you can, try to avoid too much of the same thing back to back. For example, seeing 30 seconds of bulleted items like your product knowledge followed by another 30 seconds of bulleted accolades means the viewer is kind of stationary for a full minute just reading. That's no fun. The more you can keep your viewer saying, that was unexpected, the better off you're going to be. If we look at the actual content that I show, I basically kept mixing it up. What you first saw was a list of 4 things followed by 2 video clips. Then you saw a bulleted list of 2 things, then a constantly changing PowerPoint deck. That dropped into 2 screenshots of documentation, then you saw a list of product knowledge. We immediately zipped into 2 more videos, then another list, with a cool interlude in between for more variety. Then we finished with 4 videos that did a split screen thing, then I ended with the list of my contact info. There's no real format that I stuck to. One thing was followed by something different. That's how I went with it. Now, you may come up with something completely different. It really depends on the content that you have to show. But the point is, you know, all this, have fun, and just make sure it's fun to watch. All right, I could probably talk for hours on this. If you've been paying attention to the light back there and the light on my face, daylight is starting to go away. So in a way, I actually have. But here's some more advanced tricks that I leveraged when I did my reel that I felt brought a lot more than simply a bulleted list that was set to music. 1, angles. Not everything for me was horizontal text or a horizontal line. Sometimes it was flipped on its side. Sometimes I moved it to be on its side. Sometimes it was at an angle. It wasn't often, but it was a little variety. Number 2, I'll call the masking canvas. I love when a creative element serves multiple purposes, and one of the easiest ways to do this is with a mask that doubles as a canvas or vice versa. So in the case of my video, I bounced between my blue and my beige, where sometimes that beige was a canvas where I showed things like my name or an entire part of the video. And sometimes it hid something that when I moved it out of the way in a cool way, it was like a little secret it was keeping. It's really easy to do, and it gives you a lot of really cool animation options. Speaking of fun, kinetic animation. Remember how I said twice now that not every beat means something new needs to happen? Kinetic animation throws all that away. It's the opposite of that. Now, this is very dependent on the music that you choose, but sometimes you find neat opportunities to invest a little extra time in a truly dazzling moment. One of my favorites in my sizzle reel was a short twinkling of keys that I used a drop-in behavior to make it sound like each super quick keystroke brought in new letters. Okay, last one, and I'm gonna let you go, I promise. The closing screen. The music ends, something should happen. For me, I chose to put my contact info on it. If you watch this on YouTube, it ends. Hopefully hit pause, it'll stop on its own, and say, I need to go to one of these places. My LinkedIn, the portfolio, something that I show you. And then you do. And I'm happy about that. Play around, render, post, enjoy. Now, I know I've covered a lot that could also get pretty heavy into some real how-to, especially if you haven't done video editing before. You're probably terrified by now. But don't worry, in the near future, I'm going to create some videos that of me actually doing these things in Camtasia. That's what I use for my video editing because it's easy. If you want to follow along, feel free to do so. Maybe you get some new ideas. If you're using Camtasia, maybe you'll learn some things on some editing. But in the meantime, please reach out with any sort of questions. If you want me to look at your sizzle reel, or if you want me to just help out, I love doing this stuff. I think that these are incredibly powerful tools that I would definitely love to see more of out there in this industry and from our community. They definitely helped me stand out quite a bit in my job search, and I'm sure that they would do the same for you too. So thank you so much for watching all 25-ish minutes of this, and I will see you next time.